All right, let's cut through all the noise you hear about the markets every single day. We're going to focus on a really simple but super powerful framework for thinking about your financial future. This whole idea comes from a classic guide on the subject, and honestly, it's timeless. You know how it is. The market is up, then it's down. Interest rates are doing something. And there's a new headline every 5 minutes that makes you feel like you should be doing something different with your money. It's totally natural to feel a bit lost in all that chaos. And it all boils down to one big, stressful question. With everything so uncertain, where on earth should my money actually go?
You know, the material we're drawing from puts this so well. Think about it like this. Investing without a solid plan, without doing your homework, it's basically just a huge gamble. It's like standing on the shore and just throwing your money into the sea, crossing your fingers and hoping some of it washes back. Not a great strategy, right?
So, if that's what not to do, how do you actually build a real strategy? Well, it all starts by figuring out what you're really working for in the first place. And that brings us to the absolute core of this whole framework, what are called life's 3 major debts. Now, here's where your thinking might need to shift a little. We're not talking about fuzzy, vague goals here. The key is to think of them as debts. These are real financial obligations that you owe to, well, to your future self. And when you frame it that way, it acts like an anchor. It keeps your whole financial plan grounded in what is truly, fundamentally important.
So what are they? Well, they're simple, powerful, and for a lot of us, very, very real. First, there's your mortgage, the roof over your head. Then there's your health, making sure you're covered for the long haul. And finally, your kids' education. See? These aren't about trying to make a quick buck on some stock. These are the big, fundamental, long-term commitments of life.
Okay, so once you have those big debts in mind, the next question is pretty obvious, right? How do you actually split up your money to take care of them? And that leads us to a really simple but super effective idea for managing all this. It's called the golden ratio of assets. Let's be real. When you're dealing with huge responsibilities like these, your number one goal has to be stability. It just has to. The source material couldn't be clearer on this point. Throwing too much of your money into risky, short-term bets is just not a winning strategy in the long run. So what's the answer? It's a surprisingly simple 80-20 rule. The idea is you dedicate a big chunk, 80% of your wealth, to steady, long-term planning. You know, for those 3 major debts we talked about. And the other 20%? Well, that's your playground. That's where you can experiment with some short-term stuff if you want, but it's contained. That 20% can't sink your entire financial ship. Okay, that's the theory, the big picture. But what does this actually look like in the real world? Let's take that 80% long-term bucket and apply it to one of those big debts. Let's talk about planning for an education fund. Now pay close attention to this number, because it's a big deal. An annual growth rate of over 5% for tuition and living costs might not sound that scary at first, but you compound that over, say, 18 years, it is massive. And what that really means is that the safe strategy of just putting money in a savings account could actually be the riskiest move you can make. Inflation will just eat it up and you'll end up way short. So this really gives you 2 main paths you can go down. You've got your traditional plans, which are all about just preserving your money, not losing it. But the problem is they often can't keep up with that rising inflation. On the other hand, you have investment-linked plans, which aim for higher growth to actually beat inflation. But of course, that begs the question, how do you manage the risk that comes with that? And this is the really clever part. A smart investment-linked plan isn't just about being aggressive all the time. No way! It uses a dynamic strategy that changes over time. The source material calls it aggressive, then conservative. So how does that work? It's pretty straightforward. When your kids are young and you have a long time horizon, years and years, you can invest in things with higher growth potential to really build up that capital. But then as you get closer to that first tuition bill, the strategy shifts. You start moving that money into more stable, safer things to lock in all those gains you made. That way, the money is there and it's secure right when you need it. So let's recap. We've talked about the 3 big debts, that 80-20 rule for splitting up your money, and we've even walked through a real-world strategy for an education fund. But there is one single rule, one constant principle that underpins all of this. It's the one thing that makes this entire framework actually work. And it's this. Probably the most important piece of financial advice you'll ever hear. And it's so simple. It's not about being a genius who can perfectly time the market. It's about giving yourself enough time in the market. But why? Why is starting early so crucial? Because time is, without a doubt, your single greatest asset. Think about it. A longer investment period is like a giant shock absorber for your money. It gives your portfolio the breathing room it needs to ride out those short-term market bumps and lets the incredible power of compounding really do its thing. And that really brings us to the final thought here. None of this is truly about what the market does today or tomorrow or even next week. It's about your future. So I'll leave you with this one question to think about. 10 years from now, when you look back, will you thank the person you are today for getting started?